Welcome to the Leadership Under the Microscope interview series, Plain Talk by Pragmatic Leaders, a production of JR Global. Today, we continue our series of interviews with innovative leaders from around the world. Here is your host, J.R. Klein.
Today our guest is Dr. Greg Bixler, co-founder and CEO of Design Outreach. Greg teaches engineering at The Ohio State University. He started his engineering career at Battelle, a private nonprofit applied science and technology development company, where he managed an interdisciplinary team of engineers working on various R&D programs. After seeing extreme poverty in Central Asia, he realized that there was a potential for using his engineering talents to impact these distressed areas. Dr. Bixler came up with the idea of Design Outreach in 2007 and co-founded his social impact organization to use engineering to address barriers that drive people to poverty. Dr. Bixler, we welcome you to today's program.
Thank you. Good to be here today.
The poor has been a constant throughout human existence. We have come up with various nomenclatures to soothe our conscience, but the system, whether economic, cultural, or political, have continued to create barriers to access, resulting in a portion of our population relegated to an existence of alienation. Over the last 10 years, you have been involved in an initiative that strives to find some basic, simple solutions to some of these challenges. Dr. Bixler, this is an intriguing approach to systemic change, and we're interested in your story, where you've been, how you ended up here, and what are your current passions.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's been quite an amazing journey getting to where we are today, and it's really exciting. It started about just over 10 years ago. I went on a short-term missions trip to a country in Central Asia, and the trip had nothing to do about engineering, but I was working as a young engineer at a company that did research and development work in Columbus. And I went on this trip and I realized for the first time how the rest of the world lives and what extreme poverty looks like. And I also noticed how people were using what they had available to them locally to build what they needed. They're being very resourceful, very creative. And the thought came to mind, what would happen if so-called trained engineers could come alongside people that are in desperate poverty but are very creative and innovative and help productize, to help scale their ideas that others may benefit. And this idea came to my mind, and it was something that got me very excited. And I came back to my office in Ohio, and I was giving a brown bag presentation about the trip to a number of my colleagues, and I kind of mentioned this idea of what would happen if we could apply our research and development, engineering, problem solving, scientific skills to problems that are facing hundreds of millions of people in our world today. And right away, I got a lot of interest. I got a lot of people who said, yeah, I don't want to be part of that. They weren't ready to quit their day jobs, but they were ready to volunteer and give up their lunch hours, their weekends, their evenings, even vacation time. And right around that time, we started talking to an organization, an NGO in Central African Republic. And we asked them, what are the biggest problems that you're facing? Just thinking in the back of our minds that we're engineers, we can solve problems, we can do anything. And right away, they started telling us about water pumps and how water pumps, they only last like 6 months and then they need repairs, and there's no stores around to get the parts, and the labor is not available. So driving to these communities is very difficult and it's very expensive. And so there's lots and lots of broken pumps that no one can fix. And they also told us about how water pumps are often not deep enough. So the water actually runs dry during the dry season. And I had never been to Africa at this point in my life. And this was all news to me. I'd never heard of these things. And I thought in the back of my mind, how is it that 50 years ago, we sent a man to the moon And yet today, hundreds of millions of people who are depending on water pumps can't have a reliable source of water. And so this took us down this incredible journey that we later called Design Outreach. And we incorporated as a nonprofit about 6 years ago. And there's just been exponential growth where we developed a new product, a hand pump called the Life Pump. And the Life Pump is designed to solve the reliability issues of hand pumps as well as the depth capacity. And in 2013, we started piloting with the NGO World Vision in 5 countries in Africa. And that's really where it all started. It was a group of volunteers who said, we want to change the world. And we didn't have any money. So only thing we could do is ask people to volunteer and to donate. And it was amazing just how people poured into this and got us to where we are. And today, we have thousands of people who are getting water for the first time because of the Life Pump. And our vision has always been to create technologies that help transform lives physically, economically, and spiritually. As we know that there's a world of hurt and a lot of people need technology to help solve major problems. And that's where Design Outreach comes in.
Driven leaders are always positioning toward better performance, whether in efficiencies or effectiveness. We would like to think it is as easy as pushing an easy button and everything will work out the way it should. Reality shows us that it doesn't work like that. What do you find to be some of your biggest barriers and challenges in your leadership?
Yeah, as I tell people often, if it were easy, someone else would have already done it. And yet this problem of access to safe water still affects almost 800 million people today. And those are lives that could be transformed if it were just for a simple, better technology in most cases. But there are tremendous barriers and challenges to why this is. And one of the biggest competitors is the status quo and overcoming just the way that people think. And so applying leadership in a way that changes the status quo from first developing technology that solves the problem and fixes the problem. And often I'm interfacing with engineering teams. As an engineer myself, that's a common language we have in solving the technological challenges and creating appropriate technology that's human-centered, that ties in voice to the customer. But then we have supporters, we have donors who help pay for the technology, the hardware development, the flights, keeping the lights on, and keeping the R&D going and the pilot programs. And so that's another message. And as we learn how to interface and talk with our donors who support this mission and allow us to be successful as we are. And then, of course, we have the NGO partners, the non-governmental organizations that we work closely with, and the government partners, the ministries of water and infrastructure, where they have different objectives and different interests, and learning how to interface with them and inspire them to change the status quo, to raise the bar to a place where people can have access to water year-round 100% of the time, which is revolutionary. And that all comes back to changing the status quo, and the status quo is something that is too low. And as we apply our thought process and our know-how and our influences and resources, we work towards changing that through better technology, through advocacy, through educating the donors as well as the NGOs and the governments that there's a better way to do things.
That is some insightful stuff. Do you run into any challenges and barriers at the local level now? How many countries are you in now?
We currently have pumps in 8 countries. We do run into barriers often where it's a matter of breaking through what's always been done.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the policies are set too low. So in other words, going on the status quo theme, the policy is that in certain countries only a certain type of technology can be used, even though that technology can't reach the deeper water. And so as we go forward and advocate, the challenge is creating the technology, piloting the technology, understanding how to present the results, because there aren't textbooks written on this. There aren't textbooks written on how to even work within a government in these African countries we operate. And so understanding how to even go through that process and how to get to the right people and talk to them and what results they want to see, that's been one of our biggest challenges. And of course, keeping the fuel going at the same time, where most donors who support nonprofit work like ours are accustomed to seeing projects and results. And the project might be a pump and kids getting water, and that makes people feel good. But the reality behind many of those pictures are that pump's not functioning after 6 months. And we've said, we're not just going to put pumps in, but we're going to create better technology, pilot that, prove it, take it to the international stage, and show that we can revolutionize the way things are done. And this is really entrepreneurialism. This is social entrepreneurialism connected with humanitarian aid. And it's a challenge because a lot of times we have to educate our donors who are used to thinking that for a certain amount of money that they can help people. And then the reality is, in many cases, it's not actually helping. It's just creating a bigger problem or putting a Band-Aid on a huge problem that really needs surgery.
This is interesting. It goes to the heart of the problem of changing systems, not addressing the symptoms. Life tends to teach us lessons, whether subtle or overt. What are some of the lessons that you've learned?
There's been many lessons, and we're continuing to learn. It's the old adage: the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And we continue learning that the hard way sometimes, and continually to improve and become more effective and more efficient and pray a lot, because a lot of these things are just out of our control. But as we think about the lessons learned, number one is to never give up. There's always barriers, there's always challenges, there's always things that get in our way that are discouraging at times, but persevering and never giving up. And we've seen this, and we've seen the fruit of this come about as we've been working, especially with our NGO and our government partners who have had false promises made to them in the past. And people come in, companies promising the world, promising that they have a better mousetrap, a better way of doing things, and they don't persevere, they don't continue. And then they lose, or they become discouraged that it's not a long-term solution. So it never goes anywhere. But instead, design outreach has continued to come back, continue to revisit, continue to provide excellent quality and the results that we say up front and prove ourselves to be right. And I think that's been really important for us. Another lesson that I learned a long time ago when I was a young engineer at Battelle was we can't be perfect, but what we can control is how we react to problems. And as we've run into challenges or barriers within design outreach, we learn that it's not that we're going to hit the nail on the head every time, but that we can learn from our mistakes and continue to go back and fix it and get better. So even as the Life Pump program and now in other technologies that we're developing, we've developed a system where we get very, very close. We do our own pilot testing. We do our own lab testing in our facilities here in Ohio. And then we take it to the field and we keep a very close eye on things so that we can learn and we can reiterate and we can continue fixing and getting better. And it's that continual improvement process that has been very important for us, and a lesson that we learned that we can't treat communities as a test bed, but treat them with respect and dignity as we would ourselves. And as we see different practices in the world and community development, there's been books written on these things, lots of conferences we've been to and presented at. There's the old way of thinking, and then there's the new way of thinking, and people kind of fall into one of two camps. And often the lesson is to keep up with the current thought process, to not remake the same mistakes that people have been doing for the last 2 or 3 decades, and to create real sustainable solutions that truly work for people and are appropriate for them. And so that's been one of our biggest lessons by far, is changing the status quo is no easy job. The status quo is deeply rooted, And in fact, as we think of the status quo in a place like America, it used to be that women couldn't vote. It used to be that people could own people. And yet it took a lot of perseverance, a lot of hard work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to change the status quo, to change that. And that's been something that we've learned, is to make real big, long-lasting, impactful change. It's going to be very difficult, but it's still worth it.
Getting to where we want to be has a lot to do with the road that we take. Tell us a little about your approach to leadership.
And I think that is a big conversation as you think about the approach that a leader would take. And of course, many leaders would say setting an example of themselves and lead by example. I think that's been a key part, but also as we work with different people, whether it's a volunteer or a donor or an NGO or government leader, or if it's another company, if it's an organization who's participating with us, a university, a for-profit, it's always finding what they're interested in and trying to connect that to our vision, so that that vision, that design outreach is set, doesn't change, but yet they can plug into that vision and see how they can affect it themselves. And I think it's been really important for us as we find those things that people are passionate about, whether it's a company, a university, a partner, nonprofit, that we're helping to fulfill their passion to help us and to serve together. As we start with the vision, then we connect people with the why. It's the whole Simon Sinek thing, where most companies, most organizations know what they do, some know how they do it, but very few communicate well why they do it. And so we've worked very hard, me personally, communicating with people about why we do this. What is our motivation? And often that's one of the first questions when I sit down with somebody, whether it's a new volunteer, whether it's a partner organization, as we get to know them and see if we should work together, if we can help each other in similar objectives. It's understanding their why. What is their heart, and why are they doing it? And often that'll lead to whether or not we align on areas such as excellence. And if we have the same motivation, then we're able to do really great work together. And that way we continue reminding people of the vision, so that whether it's our own staff, whether it's our partners, it's aligning and reminding around that vision, so that we don't get off course, we don't have mission drift, and reminding ourselves and reminding each other that this is the vision, that we have an abundance mentality, that it's the vision that we feel has been given to us, and there's plenty of resources to fulfill this vision, and not have a scarcity-based mentality, which is only looking at the little bit that we have and trying to see how we can split up that pie to make do, because we know that the problems that we're tackling are much, much larger than what we can do alone. And so we have this abundance-based mentality as we look forward. And that's part of the leadership that we work to project within our team, within our board of directors, within our staff, within our donor base and our partners, that we're here to impact the world. We're not here just to put a Band-Aid on a problem, but we're here to revolutionize the way things are done for the sake of the people that we're serving.
That's not only pragmatic, but noble. The way that we approach leadership, it has a lot to do with not only how we get there, but where we go. And that's very good. You've done some great things with this organization. The organization itself has done some very interesting and I would say focused impact, in that the impact that you're seeing is really the impact that you're planning on. What remains to be done in your world? What needs to happen to achieve your objectives?
Well, our longest running pumps have actually been the first pumps that were installed, and And the first pump that was installed was in a village called Zalamando in Malawi in November 2013. And I've had the privilege of visiting this community several times personally. And the pump is still running today. And in fact, they haven't had a single day without water ever since that pump was installed. It's been an incredible transformation within that community. It's going on 6 years this year that pump will be in continuous operation. And that's unheard of when it comes to hand pumps, when it comes to the amount of use. We also started piloting about a year ago a new technology that we helped develop, which is a remote sensor. It's satellite based, and it allows us to see how much the pumps are being used and when they're being used. Some of our pumps that we have sensors on are in Haiti, are in Malawi, Zambia, and Kenya, and we're seeing over 14 hours of use per day on some of these pumps. And that's actual handle rotation, which means that somebody's physically turning the handle for 14 hours every day. And so the impact is incredible. The amount of use and the number of miles that are going on these pumps is incredible. And if you had a different technology in there that they're currently using, to get 14 hours of use a day, it would last even less than 6 months before it need repairs. And often when a repair is needed, a very quick repair is done within a week. That would be considered extremely quick, an ambulance run. Normally it's weeks, if not months, before pumps get fixed. And that's one of the huge factors that we've said the life pump, it can run for 6 years with very little maintenance, continue to provide that water, and it gives people the assurance the water is on tomorrow, that they can go and there'll be water for their garden. And so they'll actually plant a garden because they have the assurance that there'll be water available. They'll keep their kids in school because they know they don't have to pull their kids out to go fetch water. The kids are a lot safer, the women are safer, and they're spending that time that they normally would have collected water for hours and hours a day. They're spending that time being productive with building infrastructure. We've seen entire communities transformed with new buildings, with latrines, with new schools, new kitchen eating areas at schools. It's just been amazing seeing that. And as we go on, our goal is to see these pumps running for 30 years with very little maintenance. And the key is, and this is part of our recipe, is that we learned that the upfront cost is not as big of a factor in sustainability as the operations and maintenance cost. And often pumps are put in at a donor's expense, and this could range from somewhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 per water project, depending on location in the world and depth and so forth. And only a very, very small part of that is actually the hardware. And we've come to realize that for a little bit more money, using high quality materials, a better design, that the operations and maintenance cost, which is usually paid for by the community, is a fraction, like 20% of the actual cost, which means it's much easier for them to afford to keep the pump running. And that's one of the keys, is understanding the users, understanding how they think and why they decide to do what they do, so that we can come alongside and partner with communities and create such an impact. And it's our desire to see many more communities that have this reliable water. But I should also mention, in places like Malawi, there's been a lot of research done on seasonal boreholes, which means during the dry season, the water drops below where the pump is set. And so for up to 3 months a year, there's literally thousands, up to 7,000 or 8,000 pumps or water sites that are dry because the water's dropped below where the pump is set. And that means that people don't have water. They're going back to a pond or a river or some other water source. They're not able to grow a garden in many cases because they can't carry enough water. So it really hurts development. It really hurts impact. And so our objective is to provide year-round water. And by going 3 times deeper with the life pump, that means that there's a much higher chance of hitting year-round water. And we've seen that now that there's been boreholes that have gone dry, are now providing water all year simply because we can go deeper.
So that's kind of what needs to happen. Yeah.
And in many cases, the wells are just not dug deep enough simply because the drillers know that the pump technology doesn't exist to go deeper until we've come along and solved this problem. And now it's a matter of scaling the solution so that the drillers are aware of the greater depth capacity. And it's also going back to the status quo issue, which is a desire to provide water year round and do that at the cost that's necessary, versus saying it's good enough that they have water 9 months a year. It's a desire to change that mentality.
That's very interesting. It really speaks to some of the same issues that we have in a lot of social impact work. It's again, as we said at the beginning, we're trying to change people's minds. We've talked about your approach to leadership, your challenges and realities, heard about your leadership journey and present passion. As we close our session, do you have any final comments that you would like to make for those who may share some of the issues you have, or have something to say to the next generation of leaders?
I think I would tell them to look at the biggest problems and to work on solutions that create lasting impact versus the Band-Aid solution, and to persevere and to not give up and to continue pushing hard, because people are worth it, and we can be a voice for the voiceless. We can show the world that change is possible and that we don't have to accept the status quo. And I think that with that in someone's heart and mind, that it would be amazing what we could do in our world today. And things like water, and there's many other issues along the same line, they're solvable problems. There's problems that we have in our world that are not solvable, at least not easily. Water, for instance, is a solvable problem. It's a matter of will, it's a matter of desire, it's a matter of putting some bright minds behind a big problem. And so I just encourage young and old entrepreneurs, problem solvers, to look at the world and see what is the thing they're being called to do and go for it. Take the risk. It's worth every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears, every penny, just to even change one life.
Poignant words and well taken. Dr. Bixler, we want to thank you for giving us your time today and letting us read your mind. You are truly an innovative leader, and thank you for the opportunity to converse. And we look forward to watching your impact as time goes on.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk by Pragmatic Leaders. JR Global specializes in socially responsible business consulting. To learn more, visit jrglobal.co.